What's up, everyone? What's up? It is Gion Thomas from Take, the lifeline to your unfiltered media experience. And today we got a special show. We got a debate/conversation with Trae, and we're going to be talking about defund the police. Trae, you want to tell the people a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yes, my name is Trae. I like video games and pretty nerdy, so just random stuff here and there. And that's pretty much it. Like I just watch whatever YouTube feeds me in my feed and try to form an opinion that way.
And also on the show, we got our co-host and producer D. Williams. So it's gonna be a great show today. And like we said, we're gonna be talking about defund the police. What does defund the police mean? And we're gonna try and make some ground, because I feel like with most arguments over defund the police, they kind of get all over the place. People don't know what defund the police means. And so we're just gonna break that down today. I guess I'll kind of start with I wrote a little something, so I guess I'll get started with that. Okay. Let me just pull it up. So look, all right. The framing around police reform and defunding the police has been misconstrued with abolishing the police, with over 58% of the country citizens agreeing that there's a major problem with policing in this country. Something has to change. Defund the police in terms of policy means reallocating resources to the community, addressing issues like schooling, hospitals, housing, mental health support, and domestic violence interventions. Demilitarization of the police, more people from the area policing themselves, harder sentences for cops, to stop broken windows policing, and for more situational training for police, and for police to lose their pensions. And so that's kind of my outlook on defund the police and what it really means. I know a lot of people will hear defund the police, and like I said, they think that it means to abolish the police. And I think when me and Trae, because under a video, we kind of had a disagreement, and that's what ultimately brought us to this place. And so, I think Trae, you had said that when we were arguing, you thought when I said defund the police, you thought I meant abolish the police, right?
Yeah, like in the long term, just slowly abolishing the police by slowly reducing like their funding or whatever. Because like some things like pension wise, because I don't know how police divvy out their payments like with pension and all that stuff, but I feel like if you slowly reduce their budget slowly, it's like eventually it's to the end goal is to get rid of them, to fire them, I suppose, is the end goal for that. But that's it.
So like I said, I think the conversation with defund the police has just gotten all over the place. And I think sometimes we get too caught up on the naming of it and not what the actually policy substance is. And from most people, which I have heard some people say they want to abolish the police, but I think from most politically active people and people that's in this area and that's fighting for defund the police, I don't think they want to totally abolish the police. I've heard very few people say they want to abolish the police. But when people do say they want to abolish the police, they're saying they want to abolish the police because of the racist history behind policing. I don't know I know a lot of people don't know, but policing started with all the way back in the 1800s with people. It started as slave patrols, and from slave patrols, it went from people enforcing Jim Crow laws, and it's continually gotten worse. And sometimes, I mean, the system will placate and make it and try and pretty it up, but ultimately, I mean, it's just our policing system is run amok. I don't know if you saw the recent video with Ronald Green and how the cops totally they covered up his murder. They said he hit a tree, then they said that he was like combative when he got out the car, and then so they had two different narratives, and then there was the truth, which this man was intoxicated, he was, and they literally beat him to death. And so I don't know, man. I just think
Mhm.
when people say defund the police, that's what they really mean. They want to demilitarize the police. They want people from the community to police themselves. And so with even with that aspect, you're getting people who are familiar with the community to police the community, because most of the times with policing nowadays, you have people from outside the community coming into the community to now police them. And sometimes that can be seen as an occupying force, because if that person has no connectability to the community, then how can he best serve that community? You're almost foreign to that land, so you may not know JoJo on the street, but people in that neighborhood do know JoJo on the street, and they know how to deal with JoJo on the street. Someone coming from outside the neighborhood may not know how to deal with it. So that's just that's just a little bit on how I feel.
Mhm. I do agree on the local citizens being part of the police force. I don't know the actual like percentage graphics of like cities and towns of the police force that makes up of the local people in that city and town versus outsourcing the
I think
people. I have
I
no
think
idea. I
I
would
looked
assume
at
it's more like more
I look
local people.
yeah. I looked at a study, and I think it said 70% of cops that police a neighborhood are not from that neighborhood. So
Hmm.
it's actually a large percentage.
Mhm. Hmm. And I would believe it if I saw the stat, but I wouldn't think, I would assume that's for maybe possibly like the largest cities in America, maybe the largest. Obviously, small towns, there's no way. There's no way a small town it's not going to be true. People on the sticks, but like larger cities, like, so in Texas, it'd be like Houston, Dallas, San Antonio. I could potentially believe that. In New York City, I would believe that. It wouldn't even cross my mind. I would assume they have to outsource police because the city is just so large in like New York, even though it's such a small area. Um, I suppose it depends on location, but I would prefer more local citizens becoming police for their local town, like like in Houston, you join the HPD. LA cops, you join the LAPD if you're a local LA person. So I would prefer that too, because it does look odd if your police force isn't like they have to outsource everybody, but it could be that nobody in your local town wants to be a police officer for whatever reason, and so that can contribute to that too. So then you have to outsource because you need somebody to police. There's no
Yeah.
as of right now, I don't think there's any local people policing themselves and having a name, because I guess they would be labeled as like a militia group and they wouldn't be favorited towards anybody. So it's almost impossible to do that unless like you have like neighborhood watch. They're not a police force, but like neighborhood watch around
Yeah.
neighborhoods. Usually all the neighbors get around, they have meetings, and everyone's aware of each other and knows what they look like and knows what vehicles they drive and who's parking where. And
Yeah.
anything suspicious, you just send like a group text out to each other or something like that, or like a Facebook group. That wouldn't be, I mean, I guess that's a form of policing, right?
Yeah. I
Kinda.
mean that's
Like
totally
you're not gonna arrest anybody, but you will then call the police if at that point.
yeah.
So
Or yeah.
it's a very difficult situation. I know if you like, let's say two countries are at war, I know the one country that surrenders to like the other one. So let's label them blue and red. Okay, so red wins the war against the blue country. The blue country most likely will just allow the red country soldiers to then police like the blue country. So because it's easier to have your citizens be policed and overruled by people who are not them if
Yeah.
you're trying to control the blue country. So in a way, you can kind of make the argument for people who are afraid of the police. You're like, oh, the police are not part of my town. I'm afraid of them. They're controlling me. It's
Yeah.
someone outside of my town. I don't know these people. They could pretty much be from another country. It doesn't matter. Like if they're from another state, they're foreign to you. So I can see that being scary. So that's why, in my opinion, the police should be, usually the majority is the local citizens policing themselves, because it's easier too. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's easier to find the local people, and then like you mentioned, local familiar faces. You're aware of who needs more help than others when talking to them and stuff like that, because it can get out of hand. And then if yeah, it's just a lot of scenarios, weapons involved, or
Yeah.
so it's it, yeah.
Yeah, man. I think people, and I think when you start to have these conversations about what defund the police, and you get into the meat and potatoes of what it really means, I think a lot of people can honestly agree with that. I mean, just looking at some of the statistics, like, I mean, just the fact that Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by a cop than a white person. I mean, to me, that's just shows that's a complete failure. I mean, Black people and white people use drugs at the same rate, but Black people are 4 times more likely to be arrested for the same. So my whole thing is, we have to address the police and then also address the justice system, because to me, both of those two things play those are two key factors that definitely need to be uh revolutionized, changed. I mean, I think what people like, I think I said this earlier, but we're getting too caught up on the name of defund the police and what actually defund the police means.
I think that we need to start calling it what it really is. Though that's where the confusion sets in, because defund means to take money away, and that's not actually what we're trying to say. So and that's why people get it confused, because defund the police can't really have a different meaning. However, when we say it, we know what we're talking about. We're actually talking about not actually taking money away from the police, but redirecting the money to where it needs to go, so that they can be better trained or whatever. There is, in a sense, where money does need to be deducted from like one area and given to another, like, you know, police having military grade weapons and all this stuff like that, that contributes nothing to serving the people. They need to be trained on, you know, how to deal with this kind of situation. Someone that's, you know, someone's mentally unstable. You know, cops are not actually trained to shoot first. People say, oh, they're trained to shoot first, but they're not trained to shoot first. They're actually trained to be able to handle handle situations a lot different. Shooting someone is really supposed to be their last resort. However, I think the training maybe has fallen short, and they, you know, and I think when it all boils down to it, it's on the individual kind of basis on how they really handle things, regardless of how they're trained. You know, when you go out, it's like someone who gets a job, and you train that person, you train them how to do the job, everything they need to know about how to do it. Well, when you're done training them, how they actually perform doing the job it could be totally different than how you train them to do it. So I said that to say the police may know how to de-escalate certain situations, but that unfortunately is not the route that they take firsthand, you know. And so with that being said, if the money is redirected and that maybe they need more extensive training, and maybe there could be like other programs implemented to ensure that these cops do the job as they are trained to do it, and not do it the way they want to do it. Because that's the problem right now. The cops are going out guns blazing, and every situation doesn't call for that. So we put that money where it needs to go, and maybe, you know, I don't have a program in mind or whatever, but I'm sure there could be a program implemented in where that money could be put into to make sure that these cops are doing their job correctly.
It's like optimizing the budget, like essentially,
Yes.
like make sure money is going to training, to equipment and stuff like that. And then part of optimizing it does mean reducing some income towards, I suppose, I'll use your words, military grade weapons, even though I kind of lump them into just weapons in general, because it's military. To my understanding, military grade anything just means the cheapest contractor willing to do the work for the government. And so the government wants to spend the least amount of money because they're optimizing their budget too. So they go for the cheapest, the cheapest they can do at the quality, they kind of pick and choose. But anyway, so it's difficult to use lump words like just defunding the whole police, because if you want more training, you would have to spend more money. You had to give them more money to spend towards training because apparently their budget already requires, let's say, Houston PT requires $1 million every year, and all of that is being spent. There's no bank account savings for them. Just assuming it could be possible that someone at HPPD is stealing money from the thing. So like a $200,000 is going to police repair, like police car repair, but it's like anyway, assuming that everything's being spent correctly, and you try to take away something from one department side, I guess repairs, and move it towards training. Now your equipment isn't being repaired as well as it should be. Now they're not having as nice equipment, so it's difficult to say defund, because especially if it's a large police, because they need all of it, and the city grows every day with more citizens, and the police in turn has to accommodate by either getting more police or more equipment or more training for those police, or outsource police, unfortunately, and get, because they need more. So I don't see defunding ever being an option, but optimizing it is a better word for it. But defunding sounds nicer.
And reallocating. That's and you know, and I've had tons of conversations with people, but this is how I kind of view the whole messaging. When Medicare for All first came out, the polling on Medicare for All was abysmal. I think it polled at like 30%, and now it's well over the 60s. And I think in the Democratic Party, it has a favorability of 90%. But how did it get to that? It got through that through messaging. So I feel like you can call it whatever. We could call it revolutionizing the police, reallocating funds of the police. It doesn't matter. It's about what's in the meat and potatoes of the policy. What is the policy proposal? What it's going to do? How's it going to affect people's lives? How's it going to change policing? I think that's what we need to focus on. I think we get too caught up on a name, and then sometimes names can be catchy. When you say defund the police, that catches people's eyes. People are like, wait, what? Wait, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it caught my attention on that one. So yeah.
So I think, I don't know. I think that we're really picking at straws. So one thing I want to ask you, Trae, is let's talk about the Bryant incident. And so how did you feel about that? How do you feel like that situation should have been or could have been handled?
So like the situation, I had to wait like a day or two for the police footage to come out. All I saw on Twitter was the company telling me what to think by promoting tweets from like local politicians or like local news media people, which was pretty much just an emotional reaction that unfortunately another Black person was shot and killed by the police. And that was all the information that was available for like 24 hours. And then the following days, the footage came out, and I think the police were justified in that shooting. And I think if it does go to court, or maybe it was decided already, I'm not too sure. I haven't looked into it since, but I think it's going to be labeled as a justified shooting. I think the officer saved the girl in the pink, her jumpsuit. I think he saved her life. And then also like there was a large white woman, I believe, who fell to the ground, and it looked like Michaela Bryant was going to stab her. The large white woman got kicked in the face by like Michaela Bryant's dad. So I think technically he saved like 2 people. So, but the dad kicked that girl in the face. I don't know. I don't know what else has been done about that or charges have been pressed, but I think it was justified.
I would say he was justified in shooting her, but continuing to shoot her.
Yeah, four times.
That was uncalled for.
Yeah, I think that was uncalled for.
That was overkill. I mean, when you shoot someone, the chances are the bullet's going to take them down, or at least slow him down. So at that point where he knew that he had already stopped her, why continue? Why deliberately make sure that she's dead? I mean, I understand he was saving her life, but sometimes you don't have to take a life to save one if you can de-escalate it another way. And so I don't say that he shouldn't have used his gun or whatever, because that's probably the quicker way to make sure that it stops her. But she was stopped. Why continue to shoot her? That's the part that got me.
I've seen like several body cam footages of police, or even other footage of random people like being shot at, and a lot of footage. Like, how do I say this? Okay, so sometimes one shot isn't enough. Like, to put it in simple terms, like one shot.
But it was for her because she went down after the first shot.
Yes, it was for her, but you don't know. And you don't know if one shot's enough. Because like how much time passed? Like 2 seconds. Let's like assume 2 seconds pass between the first shot and like the last shot, and she's on the ground, and there's like no more shooting. You don't. When you're full of adrenaline and you're actually shooting, your reaction, like 2 seconds, 1 second reaction, you have to see the first shot land, see how she reacts, and then shoot again. It's that's the optimal thing to do, right? But it's such a small amount of time for shooting, seeing the reaction of the person getting shot, how are they reacting, and then at that point shooting again. Because with 2 seconds, she could potentially get shot, doesn't put her down, and she finishes the swing in the 2 second point. So I think that's why police do shoot multiple times, is because they don't, unfortunately, like you have adrenaline, you can't really control and react fast enough. Like 2 seconds, 1 second, half a second isn't enough to react to. My shot landed, it's good, they're dead. And like in gun training and stuff, they use terminology, they use weird terms. So they say shoot for center mass. You're not shooting to kill when you aim for center mass, but like the center mass is your heart, it's a vital organ. I don't see how you're not shooting to kill if you're so it's very weird. Training is different for everybody, but I feel like just humans were not fast enough to react in these high tense situations, especially when someone's life's on the line. If we maybe had like a stun gun, of course, obviously like a stun, but not a taser, but like something in Star Wars or like in Star Trek where it shoots like a blue little circle and it stuns you. Of course, we would prefer that technology. We would always use that technology from any situation, but we don't. So, but that technology seems like it's 100% effective. With guns, I've seen statistics for like especially smaller rounds, so like pistols, primarily pistols, like 22 caliber smaller rounds. I think like 80% of people survive shootings with smaller rounds too. So that guy the officer was using a handgun. Technically looking at it, the situation when he shoots that gun, there's a 80% chance Michaela Bryant's gonna live, I suppose, if you look at that statistic. So that's why they shoot more than once, I think, is like another thing to kind of factor it, like because the small round, it is lethal depending where you shoot it. And it's like you could bleed out, even got shot in the hand, you could bleed out, now it's a lethal shot. So there's all this terminology, but I think everyone is technically trained to shoot until like whatever you're shooting at stops moving. Technically that means most likely you've killed whatever you're shooting at. So I think I don't think we're, as humans, are able to determine like the perfect, because even if you shoot for one shot, you're aiming to kill, like, I mean, you accomplish the same thing, just shooting one time. And sometimes you miss, guns aren't 100% accurate. So, and yeah, I'm just kind of repeating myself, like at this point, but I don't think you can, if you're pulling out a gun, like, I don't think there's any situation where it's very unlikely you're not going to just shoot one time only. I think most likely every time you pull out a gun's going to get shot more than once.
So are you saying that, so every time a cop pulls their gun, they're justified in killing? I mean, no. They're supposed to shoot as many times to take until that person is dead?
In the situations that they need to shoot more than once, then yes. But there's some footages of situations of police where I didn't think they were justified in shooting. There's a message, hold on. Oh, okay, never mind. The message went away for Zoom. No, I would say no, not every situation, because sometimes the cops are wrong. I can accept that. Sometimes the cops are wrong. Obviously, if they are justified in the shooting, then they were in the right. But some situations, I don't think, even if like the courts determined it was a justified shooting, I could think that I don't think it would be. There's some footage I saw of, I think, FBI agents or just maybe local police. They were trying to pull over this guy who had a warrant, and the guy was slowly driving away, even though he's not supposed to evade the police. He's not supposed to evade, but I understand in a situation, everybody's tense. The guy running away is driving away, and the police there all are all armed, and they're surrounding the car, and the guy is driving away. I think the guy driving slow enough, and the officers were able to avoid the car. I think they just shouldn't have shot him in that situation, but I think it was labeled as a justified shooting in that one. I don't know the name. I just saw a clip, but that's a very recent situation.
Yeah,
I've
I
seen.
know exactly which one you're talking about. With my whole thing with the Ma'Khia Bryant situation was, and I watched that video several times. When you break it down, there was a 10-second. It was 10 seconds from the cop arriving on the scene and the cop shooting and killing Ma'Khia Bryant. I think within that 10 seconds, he could have did more. And I think that goes to police training. Like he sat there, he kind of watched her do like kind of go into the movements and like throw that other girl on the ground and like I'm saying for him to just sit there and watch, he could have did something. He could have reacted. There was no sense of urgency of him doing anything. And then another thing is, I think when cops when they respond to like domestic violence calls, like little family issues like that, and a knife may be involved, I don't think a gun is necessarily. The cops have tons of other weapons. I mean, we have rubber bullets. We saw from last summer, and we saw how rubber bullets can do a lot of damage. Why cops don't have rubber bullets within their arsenal when tackling these situations? I just think there's just so much more that the police can do instead of just shooting to kill. And you're right, that reaction time. I mean, it's like the same thing with the 13-year-old who got shot. He threw the gun, he turned around, and he was dead because it's just your mind doesn't have that. We're not computers. We can't process that fast. So I don't know, but I think using less lethal weapons are like rubber bullets. Maybe we can create a smaller caliber gun or a smaller caliber bullet. I just think there's other things that we can do instead of just shooting to kill. I think as a police force answering to domestic violence, just petty stuff like that, I don't think no one should die leaving that situation unless that person has a gun or that person is like stabbing somebody. I don't know. I think there's a better way we can definitely do this thing of policing.
Regarding like new equipment and stuff, so like rubber bullets, for example, the only rubber bullets that I'm familiar with are like the large ones that are like the size of like a baseball, and they come out of like a noob tube. I think it's referred to as like a Mike. It's like the slang for the gun, but it's like it looks like a grenade launcher. It's not a grenade launcher. It shoots like canisters, like tear gas, and like these large rubber.
It's like the things they use at the basketball games when they shoot into the crowd.
Yeah, like a t-shirt. It looks like a t-shirt gun. Those I would assume those are just as expensive, if not more, than certain firearms. And I don't see defunding the police would help assist with them getting more of that non-lethal equipment. And then regarding non-lethal terminology, I find it's too generic because anything can be lethal. Like in my opinion, like if I pushed you and you fell down and you hit your head on the concrete, you died, I give you a lethal push. Typically pushes are not lethal, but it can turn into a lethal push just because of that chain reaction. So saying rubber bullets are like non-lethal stuff, preferably over normal bullets. If the rubber bullet hits your head, most likely you're dead. Like you're not going to survive that. It's a large rubber bullet with a lot of force.
People getting hit in the head with rubber bullets last summer, and they were they were maimed. Like one dude lost his eye, but I think at the end of the day, a person would rather lose their eye than lose their life. I mean, I don't know. And then like you said, they're supposed to the most mass. So if you get a rubber bullet. Center mass. If you get a rubber bullet to the ribs, I think you're going down. I saw a lot of people getting hit with rubber bullets, and they were falling down. So I just think, and it doesn't even have to. Like I came up with this idea that, and it's, there's a lot of holes in it, but it's an idea. Like the first 5 rounds of a cop's gun should maybe be like rubber bullets. And then if you're like responding to a situation that's not deadly, I think we can make accommodations like that.
So that's interesting. I saw a few years ago this one company. I don't know if the product is still good or not, but it's an attachment that goes on top of like a normal Glock pistol. So it looks like a rectangle. And then at the end of it looks like a ping pong ball. And so that slides over like the barrel, like say this is the barrel of the gun and like the bullets come out here. The ping pong ball slides over the barrel and it technically catches the first bullet that comes out of the gun. And now the bullet is encased by this rubber ping pong ball. And so technically it's supposed to be non-lethal. So the first shot is a rubber ping pong ball. And then after that is normal ammunition at that point. I saw something like that like a few years ago. I don't know if it works or not. And it's like a demonstration video and there's a company trying to make them for police. And so technically it's just an additional piece of rectangle metal with a rubber ping pong ball and you can put that on your belt. And then you have your gun, you get your attachment and you just slide it over, you let go and now it's secured for whatever reason. And then the first shot is always a rubber ping pong ball. But I assume you need to spend more money into that technology to make sure that it works, make sure that that piece doesn't jam the gun because now the gun's useless. If for whatever reason, like the shell casing jams exiting the firearm onto like the metal rubber thing holding onto the gun, then the gun's now useless. And the officer in any situation where he needs more than one shot, now his gun's useless after the first shot. So, but that requires trial and error, time and money, but you wouldn't be able to get this additional equipment without spending more.
So Trae, that's what I wanted to touch on. You mentioned that of course, getting this more non-lethal equipment means spending more money, which is true. However, I say that if they're spending money on all of the lethal equipment, like you said, reallocate that money to the non-lethal equipment.
Yeah.
And when it comes down, because the price is probably around the same, so that means that it won't necessarily be spending more money, but more or less, or put the money in a better price.
Use. Yeah.
But because I mentioned earlier, I don't see police forces ever staying the same size from year to year. I can only see them only growing. So there's no way to have the same budget every year because now you're forced, you probably hired 20, 50 more officers.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that they would have the same budget. I'm just saying if they're going to use money to put towards all of the lethal weapons, the military weapons, put it towards, you know what I'm saying? Put it towards the non-lethal weapons, or at least maybe half and half, something.
Something, because what we got right now is clearly not working. It's I mean, it's horrible. I mean, and the stories are just coming out. Like the other day, there was a story about this guy who was a police officer for a number of years, and he was raping black men. He was putting men at gunpoint, raping them, and then he had the justice system cover up for what he was doing.
Do you know the city? Was that Chicago? Do you happen to know at all? I know I do support the police, but I've heard that in Chicago, there's like a lot of corruption because it is one of the worst cities for crime, unfortunately. And so there's like black zones is what they refer to it. So police take criminals to these black zones. So there's no cameras, there's no accountability, and then they beat them up or torture them and stuff like that. I believe that. True. I can believe that because Chicago is just so riddled with crime, and I can understand like the need for revenge, even though I'm not going to do revenge or whatever. But like if an officer is like, oh, you killed my other officer, I don't care, I'm hurting somebody, it's always a possibility. There's no way to stop that, unfortunately, but it shouldn't happen. I condone police that take revenge and go off the book and do something, because that's a crime. It's not being a police officer. You're now a criminal. You're no longer a police
you're
officer.
A vigilante.
You're a vigilante. You're not a good vigilante. It's hard to be a good vigilante. I think it's impossible. In shows and movies, it's easy to do it, but like in reality, there's no way. You would be arrested. There's you can't just like we talked about earlier, you can't just start policing by yourself or your own community because it looks frowned upon. There's no way to do it right. And so you have to have a police force, but if that police force is corrupted, which is always a possibility because in human nature, we can be corrupt, we can lie and steal. There's like a saying, absolute power corrupts or something like that. It's like power corrupts absolutely. I forget the words. So it's always a possibility. So any situations where like police are convicted of wrongdoing, like in your situation, they were raping black guys. I can believe that can happen. And if I would like it to be that officer to be taken to court and then he gets penalized, whatever, by a jury just like any other criminal would. And he would, of course, probably get more charges than a normal citizen because it's an abuse of power and all that stuff. But you don't know until enough evidence, I suppose, comes to light. So, but that's corruption. Like, it can happen anywhere. Like, that's why you're abusing your power to hide that stuff.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, how do you feel about more vetting for police?
So that would be like background checks, tests, training, stuff like that. I do support that, but that ultimately means more spending to vent properly. So proper checks, proper tests. There's yeah, so I am in favor of that. I think officers should be physically fit, and that does require more time and training for them. Like, you can't really have overweight officers. It's like the stereotype: officers are fat and lazy. They drink donuts and eat donuts. Yeah, it's a very funny stereotype, but you can't have that in your police force. You can't have every officer look like that, because in situations where they are outmatched physically, and they're probably more likely going to pull out a gun, more likely than not. So that means a more budget towards fitness and training. But that being said, I wouldn't want officers posting on Instagram all day that they look like models and stuff like that, because they all look like models now. They all look like firefighters, and so you can't have that either. That's the negative. But I would prefer, I suppose, a bunch of TikToking officers and Instagram models and stuff like that over the stereotype of being fat and lazy, and then the police shootings go up and stuff like that because they are just not trained properly. But that means not defunding them, optimizing their budget to fitness, I guess. So adding a new fitness category for the budget, but you have to spend more. So ultimately, it's spending more money to train your officers. And I assume they already spend money for training. They just don't have enough anywhere, and they don't have the officers, which makes them outsource. So it's just an endless circle.
Yeah, I think some of the training, and I think some of that training, and I because I looked it up, but I may not be right on, but some of that training is like optional, like, and they don't have to do it. And like, so you have cops not doing the training, and so they're getting worse. And then so that they're doing worse in the field. But I think, like I said before, I think I think people get too caught up on the name of defund the police. I think people should view defund the police as something catchy and something, what are you saying? Let me hear what you're saying. Because I just, people hear it and then they either shut off, or they already suspect what your argument is.
They have formed their opinion before.
Well, I mean, but they're justified in doing it because of the fact that defund the police doesn't have another meaning technically, other than take money away from the police. And that's where the confusion comes in, because that's not what we actually mean when we say defund the police. However, it's like we say, kill all cops, but we have another meaning behind it. But to the cops, they're taking it, okay.
It's pretty literal.
Exactly. So defund the police is very it is what it is. And so that's how people say, okay, you want to take money away from the cops, because that's, like I said, that's the meaning that it has. Mm-hmm. So I think that to make people understand what we mean, or the people who mean the same thing as us, is to maybe not use that same term, Well, because you can easily say reform.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, and that's true. That's very true. But at the end of the day, I mean, we could come up with whatever name we want. If our politicians in office aren't working towards those goals, then what we could call it whatever. It doesn't necessarily matter. So I don't get caught up on names. I get caught on what people do, actions, stuff of that matter. Stuff that, because your mouth can. People's mouths can say anything and everything, but it's about, at the end of the day, what you're doing, what your action is. And I think when we have conversations like this, I think things like this, me making videos, me talking to Trae, me talking to other people like Trae, I think this stuff will help with the narrative of defund the police, or it'll help expand, and maybe somebody else will be like, I'm just one person on the internet, and there's thousands of people. And so, there needs to be some kind of community effort behind this. And people, and then honestly, I don't want to say it's not up to the Black community, but the Black community is mostly affected. Like, this issue, like, overly affects us. So, I mean, I think they have a hand in saying, like, what the name should kind of be. And I hear a lot of Black people say defund the police. And they mean exactly what I mean. So I think just with having these conversations, we'll destroy that narrative of defund the police means to abolish the police, or it means to doing things like this will ultimately help the messaging.
We hope.
I hope, right?
Like some people just so literal. So it's well, that's not what it means. Well, when the statement the term defund the police, when it first became popular, it actually meant take money away from the police. That's what they meant.
Yeah.
But once we realized that that's not what actually needs to happen,
it grew and expanded.
We have a different meaning.
It means different things to each person. Like, I've heard a saying, I don't know, I think it was like a preacher said it one time. He's like, I have 1,000 people that go to my church. Each one of these person has a different opinion on what God is. It's like 1,000 different gods to each of these people, because no one has we don't have unified minds. Like, we don't all think alike. Yeah. So like, when I hear the defund the police, I just see ultimately it means to abolish the police. Ultimately, you're taking away their budget. It's ultimately going to abolish the police. To other people, it just means defunding them, slowly taking away some money and optimizing their budget and stuff like that. And I can see that too. Like, you're trying to optimize their budget, so you're trying to reduce spending. That's what it means as well. So it could be different people interpret it different ways. And it's the same for like the saying for like Black Lives Matter. Some people interpret that immediately as only Black Lives Matter and nobody else. And then other people say Black Lives Matters actually means for everybody, all lives matter. But you're not saying all lives matter, you're saying Black Lives Matter because it's focusing on Black lives in particular. So that's why you're saying it. But it can be a different meaning for everybody. It means something different for everybody. So it's impossible. I think it's really impossible, because you find something that sounds good. Like Black Lives Matters does sound good. It gets my attention. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I mean, I agree. Who wouldn't agree, right? But then they want to argue about this meaning to this person, this meaning to this person. But we all think differently. So it's ultimately going to go nowhere regarding that debate. So it's like, it's impossible. I think.
Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible, and I know I keep on bringing up the Medicare for All thing, but like, Medicare for All can mean like one or two things. It could mean like a public option, or it could mean public, like dismantling insurance companies. There's even some policies for Medicare for All that you still have insurance companies. So I think you're like you're saying, Trae, it's broad, and no one all thinks along the same lines. But with having these conversations, it starts to build up the narrative. So now Trae, when you go out there and when somebody say defund the police, you can go up to that person. Well, do you mean A, B, and C, or do you just mean A? And then they'll be like, well, no, I mean A, B, and C. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I agree with you on that. I think, I think having these conversations is what's going to ultimately change the entire narrative with policy. And that's what we have to have these hard conversations. We have to, talk about this stuff, because I think that's part of the problem that we have now. No one's been talking about it. No one's been trying to work to try and fix it. And so, we have the broken system we have now.
Yeah, I'd like to address, like, I took some notes here while we were talking. So there's like some other things you mentioned in the beginning. It was like Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by the police. Without context, of course, that sounds bad, right? Like, there's no context. Oh yeah, police are 3 times more likely to kill Black people, unfortunately, compared to other races. But like, adding context, it's like, what is all of those situations where they justified shootings? Like, what's the percentage for that statistic, subtracting the justified shooting ones? So even though 100% of shootings are not justified, I would assume a large percent is So,
Well, wait, hold
and
up.
like,
But in
there's-
justified,
uh,
what do we mean justified? Like,
yeah,
does
exactly. What do we
corrupt
mean?
does the corrupt
Mhm.
system manage it justified? I mean,
Mhm.
so
Because there is a bias for there too. So it's almost impossible like to kind of put stuff like down for numbers and other things like that, because you, if it's a corrupt system, then the numbers are corrupt, so it doesn't matter.
So it
Like
doesn't
these
matter.
statistics don't matter. But regarding like other statistics, I don't have them on me. But I've heard that it's white, or I'm sorry, all officers in general are more likely to be killed by like black people than any other race. I think it's black males specifically. So like all the times officers have died in the line of duty, like they count them up or whatever, and so it's like the statistics show that the majority, or if not majority, majority compared to all the races, black men killed the most out of all the situations. And then it was like a percentage that's bigger than that for I can't remember the exact things, but it's like also black on black crime. A black guy is more likely to be killed by another black person. So not a black police officer, but like a black person in general. That's more likely to die.
but
So
crime is synonymous with who you live around. So
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure a white person, if you look at white crime, it's
Mhm.
more likely for a white person to commit violence against a white person. I think an Asian person is more likely to. I mean, that's with that
because
statistic, that it's all synonymous with who you live around and who's in that community.
Mhm. But I mean that's true. Yeah. Most likely crime is happening who's around you, I suppose, like is one way to see it. Or if you just get randomly mugged in the street, that's a random person, but most likely they live in your city, so it's like technically it is part of like around you. But I don't have the numbers in front of me. I wish I did. I feel like, but then I mentioned earlier the numbers don't matter because it's like what's the situation for those numbers, and the situation is like who's around you, so it doesn't even matter. Like man, it's like impossible. It's impossible to talk about.
Bro, it's a hard corrupt system,
It's-
and that's why I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to get as many young people along the way to just help me fix it. I mean, because like you said, bro, it's like the information that we're pulling is possibly corrupted. So the numbers that we have is possibly corrupted. So it's just everything is just you're pulling straws and you don't even know what you're pulling at.
Yeah. So I do agree and accept that it is a possibility. All the statistics about people being arrested, people killed by police, it could be all corrupted. I accept that possibility. I don't think it's likely. I accept the values, whatever the percentage is, I accept it as truth until somebody shows me with evidence, or there's a huge case against like the FBI, because I think the FBI is the ones who takes all the numbers down. So I accept the numbers as they are now. It's possible they could be corrupted, but like I forgot what I was going with this. I think I'm trying to think. There's like another statistic I heard about that I don't know the numbers. I'm trying to remember. It was I don't know. Never mind. Sorry about that. Never mind.
Nah, it's all good, man. D, you got anything else, man?
Not really. I think I've said my piece. My main concern was the using the term defund the police. We, like you said, Gion, a lot of people need to hear these kind of conversations, and they need to be educated on what the term actually means, versus what the term looked like. The literal meaning of the term.
Yeah.
But what the statement is actually saying is what I'm getting at. And once people hear us talking about it, or hear other people talking about it, maybe saying the same things, then people, as well as the cops too, will get a better understanding of what it means, and maybe we can have more unity when it comes down to that. Like people like you were saying, Trae, that everybody's mind is not the same. No one thinks, people don't think the same. People don't have the same understanding about certain things or certain terms. But if more people would get ear of what it actually means, then maybe they'll get an understanding, and maybe people will pull together, and that would be a start on getting the whole situation, the whole problem fixed.
Yeah, I actually just remember what I was referring to earlier about like statistics and stuff. So I heard, or I've seen Black people commit more crime on average or whatever than like other races, right? And so that means the police will enforce and police Black communities more because there is more crime happening there. Because the police are there more often policing them, there's more arrests, which adds more to the statistics that Black people are committing more crimes. And it's because like the numbers get inflated because the police are there to
Exactly.
police, but the community could potentially want the police there because there's so much crime, and so that can affect the numbers statistically. So I can see where it's like Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police because there is more engagements with Black people and police, which inflates the numbers. Like say for this month, 100 Black people had an encounter with police compared to only 2 white people. And of course, no matter what situation, most likely the police are going to have a negative experience with the Black people because there's like 100 more engagements with them than there was with only the 2 white people. So then you have to look at statistics in that way. Like what's I don't know the words for it too, but there could be adding more context to those statistics can kind of change what they mean ultimately. So it could sway your opinion. So that's what I was going for with that. Sorry about that.
That's all good. I think that we also have to look at police in a way, but just because a person is a cop doesn't mean that they're not a criminal. What I mean by that is they're human like everybody else. So a cop doesn't make you a good person. Being a cop doesn't make you a good person. Mm-hmm. It's just like being someone that's proclaiming to be a Christian. They can go out and kill somebody. Mm-hmm. They can go out and rob somebody. A cop could do the same thing. So we don't know if the statistics are true or not. And I feel like some of the statistics aren't true simply because of, it seems like it's all mostly aimed towards the Black community.
And that's exactly what Trae was saying. He was saying that, you know, cause they're probably more in the Black community, you know, you have more engagements and it just kind of inflates the numbers.
And you know, they tell us there's more engagements, but I mean, like you said, it's all synonymous. If it's an all white community or all Hispanic community, well then it's going to be the same thing. So I feel like, like I said, the focus is more on bringing out these certain numbers in the Black community, and that's just being pointed out, and you don't see that too much being pointed out in no other community. But it's still happening in every community, and that's what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm. It's difficult to talk about it because then you're kind of afraid of sounding racist. You're like, oh yeah, the statistics show that Black people commit more crime, or the Black people have more engagements with police, and so you kind of have that negative aspect where like you sound racist.
That's exactly how it sounds.
So and it's like, are you pointing it out or are you like celebrating like, oh yeah, it's good, Black people are getting more engagement with the police? So it's very weird to talk about it because you don't want to. So one person can perceive me talking about it or us talking about the statistics about, you know, Black crime and all that stuff, and they could perceive it as just all of us are being racist, even discussing it, or not, because we all think differently. Like if you look at like the bigger picture, the United States, I just Googled it like real quick. It says like in 2019, the United States had like over 300 million population in 2019. So it's like how many of that population every day has an engagement with the police? And then like you break it down, like 300 million people in the country every day, someone is talking to an officer and engaging with them, and either because they were innocent or they just committed a crime, or someone called the police on them for whatever reason, jaywalking, or like those viral videos of like white women calling the police on Black men for doing nothing or standing around or walking their
or
dog.
Just being racially profiled. I mean, I know I've been racially profiled my whole entire life. I wasn't even doing anything, and I've just been racially profiled, just stopped by the cops for no reason. And I mean, but that's something that happens with a lot of Black and brown people. It's just, we're just more likely to just get, you know, just suspected of stuff. What are you doing? I'm not doing nothing.
It doesn't matter what community you're in.
I mean, I live in a predominantly white neighborhood. I was walking in my neighborhood one night, and the cop stopped me and asked me 21 questions. I'm like, I'm going to my friend's house. They're like, who's your friend? What street they live on? how long have you lived here? I'm like, why are you asking me all this stuff? Like, bro, this is my neighborhood. Like, there's nothing on me. I'm not committing no crime. I'm going to a friend's house.
But like, to add for the police officer side, maybe he got a call from dispatch that there unfortunately was an African American in that area that did something, and so he's trying to find that person and ask questions and stuff, because they have to talk and ask, like, why. It does sound weird, but like, officers like, what are you doing here, dude? Why are you in this neighborhood? It does sound weird, because it's like, I live here, of course I'm here, I'm walking to a friend's house, but you don't know what information the officer has to come up to you, like, to ask you. He might be trying to find something or someone, but he could be corrupt too, and he's trying to make an excuse to arrest somebody.
Yeah.
So
let me give a little context to this. He lied and said there was a curfew, and I follow stuff, and I was like, "There's no curfew," and then he was like, and then I recognized the cop. The cop, he actually went to my barbershop, and so I was like, "Hey, bro, I know you."
Oh, he's a local person, which is good.
Well, I mean,
like
my barbershop is in Cyprus, so it's, I mean, kind of, sort of.
Okay.
It's kind of
well, because you don't know, he could be coming from Georgia, and now he's over here, and now he's going to that barber. Yeah, okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
So yeah, no, it's just, I don't know. I just think cops need to just change, and you know what? Cops need to be more present in the neighborhood. I'm not against policing. I grew up. My mom worked in the justice system, so I grew up around a lot of cops. I also grew up learning some cops are bad. Like, hey, don't talk to that cop. That cop's an a-hole. Don't talk to that cop. That cop beats his wife. You know, like, there's certain things, you know, like David was saying, all cops are people, but you know, people need to reconnect with cops. Cops need to reconnect with the community. Cops need to know who they're policing, who they're talking to in the community. I think when people understand that we need police, because without police, what is there? There's like anarchy and lawlessness.
And lawlessness,
So, you know, we need the police, but we just need the police to do better. I think that needs to be, and I always say that, I try to say that, as mad as I be on my show, I always try and say, you know, I want the police to do better, because ultimately you can't just keep killing people, because that's not gonna work out. I don't, and I see people getting more anxious. I think it was last year in 2020, it was like a couple of weeks after George Floyd, some people shot at cops in California, and I'm like, I don't want that, but I only see more of that happening if we don't address these issues, if we don't address the issue at the core. So yeah,
it's like, if a officer does pull you over or talk to you, the sound advice is to just comply and like answer truthfully and all that stuff. Legally, you don't have to, right? You can get a lawyer. Like, a lot of people do that, but like, I'm not talking to you. Are you arrested me? But if you're not arresting me, I'm leaving. But then that can be seen as resisting arrest if he does change his mind and try to. So there's no like, oh, here's a cheat code to talk to an officer. This is what you need to say, or you need to comply 100%. Because if the officer is like, I want you to kill somebody, well, then obviously you don't want to comply to the officer if he's trying to tell you to come. So there's no, to be safe in general, it's like you technically comply and within reason, I suppose. But everyone's reason is different and stuff, so it's difficult to do that. But I've seen people like in my high school and like just strangers and stuff like that, where they're always like, fuck the police, I hate cops, I'm never going to comply, I'm going to run away from the officer if he tries to talk to me. And then that causes an incident, and the police life feels like his life's in danger, and then that causes a shooting because you're resisting arrest or you're not complying, you're not listening, and then that inflates the statistic that officers are killing a certain group of people because for whatever reason they just weren't complying, even though that sounds terrible, right? Like, you can't make anyone comply and do anything legally, but adding the context where the officer is just trying to talk to you or trying to figure out a situation, or if you did commit a crime and so obviously you're not complying because you committed a crime and you're trying to not get arrested, then it's unfortunate. But if you comply and listen, God, that sounds so weird to say it like that without context, but like, if you comply within reason and you cooperate within reason, most likely you're going to survive the police engagement. Like, you're going to survive that day. The police aren't going to shoot you, but you could get a bad officer and who's trigger happy because they have no training. Like certain situations, like where that one white officer, female, she let go of like the black guy, and he got back in his car, and then she thought she had a taser, but she shot him with a gun.
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So you could get super unlucky, and because he wasn't complying, she thought she had a taser and she didn't. She shot him. I think that got labeled as justified, even though that's weird, dude.
I think that was so much BS. How do you like a gun is way heavier than a taser? I don't understand.
And it's on a different part of your belt too. Like I would assume you would have the taser on your left hand, your dominant hand would have the gun or something like that, right?
Exactly. It also has a totally different feel. It's not even shaped the same.
So, but it's like if that guy maybe complied, maybe that situation wouldn't have happened, but who's to say that she would ultimately do the same thing again? Like one of the officer has the black guy handcuffed, and then she thinks that he's resisting the handcuffing, so then she pulls out her gun, says taser, and then the situation happens regardless. So I feel though if you comply within reason, most likely you will survive a police encounter, unless you just get super unlucky and the officer's corrupt, and then you're kind of fucked. Yeah, you're fucked at that point. But I feel like because there is so many people, and I feel like it's a very, very, very tiny % chance like that will happen, but I don't deny that it could happen, and it's always a possibility. So that's why it's like, okay, just comply, listen to the officer. Don't do anything crazy. Don't put your hands like in your pockets.
Keep your hands at 10
your hands.
Don't make any sudden movements.
Keep your hands crossed.
I'm not gonna lie to you. Most black people, it's called the talk. And black people get this talk, especially like around a young age, especially like, between like the ages of like 5 and 13. I got to talk way early. And it's, they like my mom taught me how to deal with cops, how to interact with cops, don't make any sudden movements, always keep my hands visible. But that's certain things that, people in other communities, they don't have to have that talk with their kids. And I think that's a failure of America, that, throughout the Black community, parents have to have a conversation with their children on how to interact with the cops so they don't wind up dead, and just to make it home. Like that's literally the message at the end of the day, make it home. And that doesn't necessarily mean make it home like that day, just like come home alive. Like, even if you got to get arrested, like we'll get a lawyer. And it's just, for another community, and it's not like that. I really see that as a failure on our part.
I feel like everybody should tell their kids to come that talk that you mentioned, like you with an officer, you keep your hands, you don't do jerky movements and stuff like that. You comply within reason, kind of boiling it down to simple terms. I think everybody should have that conversation like with their children, and then in turn that could potentially help every situation. But you don't know the situation. You could get unlucky, like with a bad cop. But still, I think I don't think that should be exclusive to Black people. I don't think Black people should only have that talk with their own kids. But then there's the statistics that for Black families, you're more likely to not have a father if you're Black. So it's like the dad's not around to have that conversation too, and you have to have it with your mom or grandma or whoever. And then there's like a statistic where if you're a single parent household, that child is more likely to be a criminal or be arrested and stuff like that. That's
like the dumbest statistic in the world, bro. I'm part of that statistic, and I like, and yes, my evidence is anecdotal, but I think those statistics are like way old and way out of dated. I know, and like I'm saying, like everything I say is anecdotal, but I know a lot of people who have broken that narrative, like totally, completely destroyed that narrative. That, just because you come from a single Black parent home, you're more likely to commit crime. And I don't.
It depends how you like view the statistic or whatever. So we talked about earlier, statistics could be BS at the end of the day. It could be all corruption too. So it's like, who do you believe, and who do you choose to believe and stuff like that. But I really think because you can't just say comply 100%, because then you get abused and stuff like that, but comply with the reason. I feel like that could be a big turning point, but there could be some situations where the person is like mentally challenged, or like they have like a mental breakdown, and the officer, I think there's nothing you can do at that point. The situation is already past whatever in the context or whatever, like the mentally deranged person has a gun somehow. Do you have like more gun control and stuff? But gun control isn't necessarily good, because what about everyone else who has a sound mind and needs the gun for protection, especially if you're defunding the police and the police aren't going to be around your neighborhood anymore? You kind of need a gun at that point to defend yourself and police around yourself. So it's an endless cycle. I feel like there's not really anything you could do, because I wouldn't want the police to have total control over me. Even though I support the police, I wouldn't give them total control, where like they made a law where no one can have guns except the police. I wouldn't like that. That would go against our constitution, and stuff like that. But then you bring in the constitution for questioning, like, okay, does the constitution say what's the age for someone to own a gun? Like, because I have kids and my son's like 3, he's almost 4. I think in the constitution there's no age for owning a gun. Just like technically my son could have a gun if he wanted one, even though he's only 4. But so I would be infringing his constitutional right of owning a firearm if I didn't give him a firearm. So it's
that's crazy to even think about it like that.
And some parents do give their kids guns. Like I've seen like some YouTubers who are pro police and stuff like that. They post social media posts like, oh, I got I got my kid a gun, an AR-15, and he turned 8 today or something like that. And it's like, I think technically you can do that, like depending on your city. I think certain cities and states or whatever. But according to the Constitution, I don't think there's an age limit for owning a firearm.
No, or any kind of gun. So you can own a weapon of mass destruction.
Well, it's like, because I mean, you know my opinion about lethal and non-lethal. It's like anything can be lethal. So it's like anything can be a weapon of mass destruction, right? Like a knife. If I stabbed 1 million people with this knife, this knife is a weapon of mass destruction. I killed 1 million people. But these terms need to exist. Like we need to have terms label things. But then it's like, oh well, I technically view this knife as a weapon of mass destruction, and so that's why George W. Bush took us to Afghanistan, because of this knife. It's a weapon of mass destruction that they found. So, but then, oh my God, I'm rambling. Really, I'm sorry.
You're good. You're good.
Conversation.
I wouldn't really see a knife as weapon of mass destruction, because it's not a weapon of mass destruction kills more than just people. It kills the surrounding environment, everything.
You can use the knife to cut trees down. You could use the knife to kill animals.
Well, good luck with cutting a tree down with a knife.
Right.
That's me being a smartass, right? Like about the knife. But so when you label things, it's like, well, I mean, can you really label something?
It depends words? Because think about what a bazooka can do versus a pistol.
Yeah, but like bazookas aren't in the Constitution, right? But like, would technically a bazooka count as a firearm in the Constitution? So we technically should all own bazookas, right? So
that's the argument people use for being against the Second Amendment. They're like, oh well, who's to stop me from having a bazooka?
Yeah. And it's like the society is so you're not allowed. Oh, okay. This is what I know about firearms. I know whatever year, I think in the 80s in the US, they stopped manufacturing all fully automatic weapons. Like there hasn't been, I think, since the 80s for civilian use. Technically that's being produced for the military, right? So any automatic weapon found in society now, like either gangbangers, criminals have them, they were all made prior to that law. And so we haven't destroyed them. They're still in circulation and in criminal organizations and stuff like that, or like whatever. Okay.
I know a couple of gun owners that got fully auto stuff from the 80s, and those guns go for like $5,000.
Yeah, because they're very, very rare, very expensive.
Rare,
they don't make them. I think to legally own them, you have to go through like a huge course to own a fully automatic weapon. I think it's completely different than like a normal semi-automatic weapon.
I think there's tiers. I think there's tiers, and I don't know if that's tier 3 or tier 1.
Like I feel like it is regulated like heavily for that, just for a fully automatic weapon, and there's so whatever for those. But then I heard a random thing about fully automatic legal owners. There's never been a crime committed by somebody who owns that fully automatic weapon, because it's such a strict testing for or whatever. So you're of sound mind, you pass like all the background checks, whatever. So it's like technically they're the safest firearm owners, are these people that go through these strenuous things just to get this fully automatic weapon, which can be seen as a weapon of mass destruction. And so it's like, who wants to get these weapons of mass destruction? Criminals typically want to get them, right? But like, who gets them legally? Would you think they're crazy to go through all these restrictions just to get this one little, a fully automatic weapon? You look crazy, I suppose, to a lot of people. You go through all these hoops just to get it, and you get labeled as a criminal, even though it's technically all those people that went through that trial and fire to get it. They're the safest citizens or the best citizens because they don't commit crimes with the. But it's who's to say we can't do that same thing with a bazooka or like a rocket launcher? Even though I don't think we should. I'm in favor of not allowing citizens to have bazookas. But if we were at war with China, let's say China today declares war with us, well, then now I flipped the switch. I think everybody should own a bazooka. I think everybody should have all these weapons. I don't care if your mental state at this point, we need to have them because we're at war with China now, or another country, and it's a possibility of us being raided. And then, like, in that sense, it's like, wouldn't you want your police to be prepared and have tanks and bazookas already because we're at war with another country? And so then that allows them to get more funding for those military weapons and stuff like that. Because
heck, they already have the military weapons.
And some do
already have the tanks and stuff.
Some do have tanks. Some have armored Humvees. I've seen posts on Twitter. They get donated. Sometimes somebody gives them that.
So just to backtrack a bit, because they already have it, that's part of the that's an element in the initial conversation, is that because they already have this stuff, they don't need to focus on getting more of it because we're not at war with no one.
I think Trae was talking about a scenario, bro.
I know he was, but he just took my mind back to.
But I'm
trying to keep it all together. I'm so sorry.
You're good, man. But at the point someone is getting on a homeland, everybody needs to pick up a gun.
And that's the Constitution was made back then when that was a scenario where England was invading us and stuff like that. So a military grade weapon, we're going to use this terminology, I don't like it. A military grade weapon was a musket that took like a minute to reload and fire. That was like the only firearm available. If you had it, technically the army had that or whatever. That's
you had the same firepower as the army.
But today you don't have the same firepower as the army because we limited making fully automatic weapons and stuff like that. So it's a weird conversation in that sense because there's so much context and things like that about it. But I think everyone should have a firearm within reason. If you pass like a background check, if you're sound mind. But who's to say that like I buy a firearm today, I get cancer tomorrow, I get a brain tumor in my brain, and my brain tumor tells me I should kill people with my new firearm? Like there's no way to stop that. Like, it's a possibility. It's a very small chance, but apparently some shootings, like I think that happened in Austin, Texas, with like there's a college in Austin, Texas, like a few years, like a long time ago. A guy had like a rifle and he was shooting people from like the watchtower, the watchtower, the clock tower. And that was that's what it ultimately became because he did have a tumor. Like that is the exact same situation. He had a tumor and he said that he had voices in his head telling him.
He had voices in his head. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So like there's no way to prevent voices from going to that guy's head. Like, and then who knows if he's lying? Like you can't really prove it unless you brain scan him and you find a tumor. And most likely he's telling the truth, but maybe he's not. Maybe he did it within reason. You don't know, and so that's why they go to court and stuff like that. So who knows?
Well, it boils down to you even though we like to, we just can't cover every little aspect.
You can't cover every aspect. You know, if I could get the corrupt racist cops out from stop being cops, like from even entering, if I can stop the crazy people that I know who are crazy from getting guns, you know, that stuff like that is fine. You know, I'm not for. I think people sometimes they come on the channel and they see me talk and they're like, oh, this guy wants to. I'm very pro Second Amendment, so I don't think anybody would ever say, oh, he's not pro Second Amendment, because I'm very pro Second Amendment. I just don't think, you know, crazy people should get guns, or, you know, people who have like extensive background checks, or not background checks, but like if you have like a long crime history, no, I don't think maybe. But I think maybe if you do have one crime history, like one crime incident, and it's not you know, like
Like,
anything.
what's the context of the crime?
Yeah, like
It's
what's the
like that.
context of the crime? And I think there should be, you know, there should be classes that you should be able to do rehabilitation. I'm all about rehabilitating. So if there should be, you know, a track for you to, you know, but that's way off topic.
Like if you serve your time in prison and you go through it and you serve the years or month, whatever your sentence was, technically you have gotten rid of that. You served your time. You shouldn't be viewed as a criminal. You did your time. You're no longer a criminal. Like you did it legally, I suppose, in prison or whatever. But no one's going to hire you because you have a criminal record because they think you're a criminal still. And then and then that only leads you more to a life of crime because no one's going to hire you.
So nobody's going to hire you. You gotta still eat.
So and a thing about that, it's like there's a bias for that. Like there's people confirmed that some judges were paid off by private owned prisons or whatever to convict people to go to prison. And so you don't know about it. That is corruption. I don't support that, but like you wouldn't know about it until how many years has to go by for that corruption. Before someone blows like the whistle on it, like they blow the top, they confess like, oh yeah, I did partake in that. Here's my story. And then you have to believe them or not believe them, all that crap. That had to do, that made me think of something else about, so like for police officers and like their local judges, there's a bias when a police officer arrests somebody. He brings them to that judge. He's probably sees that judge every day. He's like, here's a new person I arrested last week. He beat his wife or whatever. Of course, the judge is going to believe the officer. He deals with that officer every day. Like he's always arresting somebody every day because there is crime happening. There's millions of us in the city. Some of our citizens are bad and they commit crimes. Like it's not a fair trial because there's the bias that the officer is right. That's why he arrested him. Like, so there's no way to stop that from happening. And it's like, looking with no context in the situation, I'm more likely to believe the officer because the officer is supposed to hold the law. But if he's corrupted, then it gives him an easy out to be corrupt and stuff like that. So, oh man. So
man, policing in our country is it's a big cluster, you know, it's just a cluster of issues. But I think we got to see like eye to eye on a lot of things. I don't think we disagree. I honestly don't. I think
on a lot. Yeah, I don't think we disagree on a lot. Yeah.
I don't think we disagree on a lot. I just, you know, we gotta have more conversations like this. We have to explain what defund the police and possibly change the name. I'm all for changing the name. I just know I can't make that decision on my own. That has to be like a community thing, America thing, you know. So
everyone agrees. All 300 million of us agree.
Yeah, or
on that.
Or we can get 200 million. That'll be fun.
The majority, and then that sounds like a whole new government. Now the government thinks we're exiting the country, and so now they try to kill us or whatever because of that. So, and they're justified in doing so because it looks like we're defunding the government at that point. Instead of defunding the police, we're defunding.
I'm so for defunding politicians, though. That is one thing that I am. Get dark money out of politics. That is what I'm for. But I mean, that's I think we're gonna call it a show. Trae, is there anywhere that the people can find you?
Oh yes, I'm on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. But it should all be I Lazy Gamer I for all of those, or there could be variants. So it could be like I Lazy Gamer I, so like the letter I and then Lazy Gamer. But that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, man, we're gonna definitely put your stuff in the in the description so people can find you. This has been a really good conversation, man. I thank you for coming on the show, us doing this. I think we really got to the meat and potatoes of what defund the police means. I think we had a nice civil conversation. We got to explain our viewpoints, where we were both coming from. I think a lot of people sometimes, like I said earlier, people watch the show and they get these conceptions. They like, oh, I know who you are because you said this, and this. Mm-hmm. And when you really hear me, like, you know, when you hear me speak about it, it's like, oh wow, you have, you know, that's something I could agree on. So I'm glad we were able to have this conversation, man.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. It was fun.
Yeah, definitely. So all right, guys, that's our show. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any uploads. Thank y'all for watching. Y'all have a blessed day.